What if George Washington was just a clout chaser? What if he was on the banks of the Delaware River that fateful day and he was essentially doing it all for an Instagram reel? And this is our founding fathers, our original great men who made this country. What if they did it because they were just chasing their own narcissism and not because there was actually any type of interest in creating an American community? What if it was just about running away from a dictatorial system under the guise of religious freedom, but ultimately just a smokescreen for people who just wanted to take advantage of situations? Because this isn't anything new. The things that we're looking at today's society in the news, it's just a continuation of what has been the origin story to the American experience. People like Thomas Jefferson very publicly went out, stated that Second Amendment was a necessary component to protect against the tyranny of government. Nowhere in the Constitution is written that is even the case, because it is a well-regulated militia that is called for. But we have changed that meaning to reflect the words of Thomas Jefferson, just like the promises that were made by our forefathers. Rug pulling is just as American as apple pie. Rug pulling is the original American sin. It is the foundation for everything that goes into this capitalist society that we live in. And it's something that is innate to how we relate to the world. Today's Precision Cycle isn't about trying to wade into political waters. It's not about picking sides. It's not about trying to make sense of a world that is actively falling apart. It's about putting into context a very real issue that is not being acknowledged when we set cities on fire due to protests and our disagreements with the government. Rug pulling is America. Gaslighting is America. Narcissism is America. In today's Precision Cycle, we're going to talk about how narcissism has essentially become built into the cake. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to acknowledge it because we don't want to admit those parts of ourselves. But if we're really being honest, we have to understand that America is a me-first country. It is a country that rewards narcissism. It is a country that is currently being inundated by a culture that is increasingly more and more disconnected from their neighbors. And that is America. As we sit here, we analyze and we try to make sense of how our cities are on fire and the world is falling apart. Let's dive into some of the hard truths, which is freedom was not what the founding fathers offered. They offered a blueprint on how to extract as much wealth as you could. Until we recognize that is the purpose of this whole American exercise, we will remain stuck in our own depression, stuck in our own inability to reconcile the fact that we were born with consciousness. We were born with things that make us human. And that humanity lives in stark contrast to the inhuman way America was established. This isn't a political rant. This is just to present facts and to understand why Precision Cycle offers the best solution forward in a country that is clearly still operating as manifest destiny. The only thing that has changed is that we no longer wear powdered wigs. Barack Obama is just as much a violent president as Andrew Jackson. Thank you for joining us today. This is Precision Cycle, brought to you by Elevate.epo. Let's open it up. So we mentioned today manifest destiny is TikTok, narcissism, and powdered wigs. It's the permission slip for extraction. It's the way that we've been able to, as a society, give ourselves the leeway and the freedom to go out there and feel okay about taking lands that weren't ours, taking property that wasn't ours, taking wealth that wasn't ours, and redistributing it towards a collective handful of people, which are now in charge of most of the wealth in the world. Does that sound familiar? Yes, because back then the billionaires at the time were the Thomas Jeffersons, were the founding fathers, were the George Washingtons, the people who were leading the revolutionary charge, who we have to be quite frank about. They sold it as religious freedom, but really they no longer wanted to pay taxes. That was the crux of the American Revolution. People who said they wanted to be free, taxation without representation, and ultimately not have to kick back to their overlords in England with any type of sort of tax regime. When we look at it from that perspective, we're seeing that there's not much difference between an Elon Musk and a Thomas Jefferson, except that Thomas Jefferson was considered an American citizen, but the interests are the same. And that's led us to this manifest destiny perspective, the ability to understand that if you go out and you cultivate it and you do it, you're going to reap the rewards, because that's the American system. We're here to pick ourselves up by the bootstraps. And that's really what America's become, clout-based morality. As long as the narrative slaps, ethics are negotiable. We're not supposed to be here and care about human rights, because as long as we get the story correct, we can pretty much pass any type of human suffering and make it acceptable. And this is not unlike what modern influencer culture has become. Aesthetics over impact. People would rather see the inauthentic, narcissistic side of people rather than that impactful, human, authentic version of themselves. And so we're stuck in this constant cycle where we're chasing validation from ourselves on social media. This is, again, America. And I hate to keep coming back to that refrain, but it is as American as that self-centered, conceitedness, narcissistic perspective is as American as the Revolutionary War. If you feel uncalibrated, it's not you. It's you finally waking up to a system that has left you behind and has shown itself to be nothing more than violence and a mechanism for compliance. Everything is great as long as you're spending money and you don't ask too many questions. I hate to be the bearer of this bad news, but I think it's important to come to an understanding that the reflections we see in the clinical space, the presented narcissisms, the borderline personalities, the people who are completely stuck in their head, they're reacting to a system that they live in that gaslights them into believing they're the problem, as opposed to the lack of infrastructure, the lack of services, the lack of opportunity that exists in the world. Before we continue, I just want to give some more background into myself. I used to believe in the system. I grew up, I was a political science major, went to school, came out of that, believing that the government was a great institution and that the only way to achieve any type of meaningful progress was to have government pick winners and losers. What I've come to learn, however, after working at policy NGOs and then translating that into corporate work and now clinical work, the world doesn't want change. The world wants control. That's my observations as someone who has gone through the entire cycle of learning and been a passive observer and consumer of American politics throughout my life. With that perspective, we're going to dive right into performative outrage. This is what we're seeing on mass scale today. The people that are out there protesting, you have 100% right to protest. It's guaranteed free speech. It is a mechanism that you have to engage your disagreement, disapproval of the government. By all means, everyone has the right to protest peacefully and respect local businesses and people in their space and get their message across without having to create as much disturbance as possible. That is protest. That's absolutely valid. What I am saying is that cities on fire is not appropriate. Performative and selective outrage is not appropriate. These demonstrations and subsequent violence, the curfews being put into effect. I live in Northeast Los Angeles. I've lived in Northeast Los Angeles my entire life. I'm very familiar with the city. I'm very familiar with the area. I know exactly where all these protests are happening. I know well enough not to go down in that area and to be part of any of that. If you ask any of us living in parts of LA that are a little bit farther removed from these theaters of active disturbance, they'll tell you life here is pretty normal. We can pick up and go about our daily business. I don't think I've seen one person in uniform in my entire time out. And that's really the reality of it. The demonstrations and the troops are all located in a very small pocket of LA down by Union Station, by the federal courthouses, immigration buildings, and they're being localized to those areas. And then from there, they're growing in bigger numbers and spreading out. People have every right to protest. Do they have rights to throw rocks at federal officials who are driving by doing official business? No. Do they have the right to threaten police officers and spit on them and throw rocks in them and degrade them and demean them? Absolutely not. That's never been appropriate. The real threat here then isn't the government and how it's operating. The real threat is the erosion of social infrastructure, the economic hollowing out of America, the data colonialism that is currently being seen in our American financial institutions. And that's the part that we don't necessarily put together, is that immigration, the culture wars, the TikTok outrage cycles, all of that is more evocative of the social erosion that's occurred and that continues to occur because we continue to normalize narcissism. Narcissism has become the drug of choice for a government that knows people are apathetic. The Nazis in Germany in the late 1930s and early 1940s had the population hopped up on methamphetamine so that they can fight World War. America in 2025 has people hopped up on social narcissism so that it itself can fight its own culture wars that we're seeing currently being played out throughout the world. And this is the thesis of why Latinos for Trump happened, because it's not stupidity and it's not in any way being cynical and it's not people not understanding what's going on. It's a survival instinct that was born out of too many times being the victim of that rug pull. Really, Latinos for Trump is the response to liberalism smiling at you while it's stabbing you in the back. We can get to immigration as a whole. It's not a new topic. Obama and liberal Democrats of the time weaponized hope because what they did was offer up to immigrants, just plainly, DACA, the deferred action, which essentially said, come out of hiding and enter a database so that we can surveil you. But it wasn't a protection. It was essentially an order that said, we're going to defer action on this case, but you're not guaranteed any status. You're in this country. We are recognizing that you're in this country with or without any type of visa or right to be in this country. We are not going to enforce the law. We are going to wait on that and let this essentially kick the can down the road. That's all well and good in the moment, but when you get to the fact that this is left up to the whims of administration, you see the danger here. You see how Obama weaponized hope, gave these people hope, put it out there that we see you, we love you, give us your data so we can deport your uncle. That's what Obama said. But he sold it as hope. This is deferred action. This is stuff that we can sit here and be dreamers and have these euphemisms about how we're not actively in a status that is leaving us in a precarious state. And that creates the impetus for this idea of, hey, the bottom's falling out. This rug pulling is occurring in real time. Exactly. That's why Latinos for Trump is a thing, because they were sold a bill of goods and they were the first group to be thrown under the bus as a political token and as a political football. This is the essence of what we're living in. 2025 exists as a byproduct of failed immigration by the Obama administration that continued with Joe Biden, and now a reaction to this is survival. We know how this movie ends. It ends with you putting the blame back on us after you go out there and you ruin the economy and allow billionaires to cheat and steal from American populations under the guise of a pandemic. And you normalize prices that are 3 times what we were paying back in 2019. all because now have democratic leadership up top. This is the disconnect. This is where are willfully gaslighting people for reacting to social narcissism. We use Latinos and then get upset and call them quitters when they decide they no longer want to be used. And thus Latinos for Trump. You're not crazy. You're being gaslit by people who say love is love while letting ICE jail and cage young children. So what is liberalism today? In reality, it's not leftist. It's not progressive. It's been a euphemism that conservatives have put on Democrats to label them as being, quote, soft. They're liberally minded socially. They're people who accept gay marriage, alternative lifestyles. Love is love. You should be allowed to live your life however you want to live. But we have to understand that liberalism isn't the velvet glove we think it is. It's a glove wrapped in an iron fist. Because ultimately, liberalism means game theory. Liberalism means if I win, you have to lose. Civility as compliance. That's what liberalism is. Economic liberalism goes back to the days of laissez-faire economics. If we want to go back to simple high school history, the idea that people are left to engage in commerce in a free market, that libertarian ideal, that's what liberalism is. The conservatives have hijacked that designator, slapped it on people who don't agree to normal conservative values, and really demonize people who have social consciousness as being liberal. But the reality is there's nothing liberal about us. Trying to be a captain of industry, looking to rip off my neighbors and extract as much value as I can from them. That's never been me as a liberal. And thus we have to rethink these labels because they're just like any other type of psychological disordered label that we want to attach ourselves to. It's an identification for something that is excusing our own bad behavior and our own narcissistic pursuits, because that has become the commodity of the United States. Overt narcissism is now normalized. Engagement in social media, getting likes and views, that is the new virtue. Awareness is now monetized dopamine. That's the thing that people have been left to reshape their worlds as, is understanding that I'm here to build out my personal brand because that's America. The value proposition to all this is that the United States isn't so much a government or an idea as it is a holding space to Winnicott for how do we manifest our best lives. That discomfort you feel, that's your conscious waking up to the contradiction that this country is a lie, that they have foundational virtues, the values, the things that you came to believe about it aren't necessarily 100% accurate. And we're left with a natural anxiety, fear, depression of the fact that the thing we thought was how it was ended up not being what it was. I'm always reminded of this great scene in where Marlo Stansfield is confronted by a security guard who is questioning him and his actions. Marlo Stansfield is an entrepreneurial gang member, essentially. And after hearing this security guard out, he very plainly says, you want it one way, but it's the other way. That's America in a nutshell. You want it one way, but in reality, it's another way. And that is what your conscious is waking up to. The tension that exists in that apprehension of understanding that you have social conscience, while at the same time having to tap into personal narcissism that left unchecked could potentially lead you to all kinds of negative outcomes. And so what is the real decline if we are to look at it? Because people are burning down the city for various reasons. We can say it's immigration. We could say it's Gaza. We could say all the varying different issues in this world today. But really all of those, again, human suffering notwithstanding, and it's horrible that we're still in 2025 and treating lives so destructively. But if we look at America with the issues plaguing it right now, It's not immigration. It's not even the wars in the Middle East, the violence in Asia, the war in Ukraine and Russia. That's not necessarily even top line issues that the Americans have to really sit down and think about. What we really have to think about is how we've outsourced manufacturing to China, India, and other countries and no longer have a very viable middle class. We have to reconcile the fact that education has been demonized as elitism. And so we have an entire population full of uneducated adults walking around acting like children who have no real value proposition outside of the service class offerings that this country is becoming. Because really, Uber and Lyft has become the normalized hustle culture of people who have decided that education was not their forte and that was not going to be their pursuit. And so rather than build a skill outside of a trade school, people are now left to manage 12-hour days, 7 days a week, making minimal money, being trapped in modern day sharecropping models for Uber and Lyft. I just had a conversation with an Uber driver who said that it takes 4 days of 12-hour work to pay off the car that he rents to do the Uber. Everything after that is his. Think about that. He has to work 40 hours a week just to break even for the car he uses to perform the job that then he's free to make 100% on minus the taxes. Guy puts in 80 hours a week. So he's already putting in another work week on top of the work week that he's already worked just to see any money. Tell me how that is progress. Tell me how that is the American dream. Tell me how that is what George Washington crossed the Delaware River for. To have indentured servitude presented to you in another way and have it given to you as if it's freedom. The American dream is Instagram brand. It's not upward mobility. It's not property. It's not even hustle culture. The American dream has become, how do I present myself as my most inauthentic version for likes? And so we see how liberal politics has brought us to where we're at. Here in Los Angeles, you walk down the street, and this was a thing that Mitt Romney said, for taco trucks on every corner, right? Los Angeles has literally become that. And there's a part of people who celebrate that, right? But the reality is that sidewalk food stands in LA, that's not charming. They're evidence of a failed safety net. We let people survive in plain sight and call it freedom. These people have been let down so much by society and by the system that we normalize and tolerate the fact that they have to make quesadillas on the street corner just to survive. We call that hustle culture and say that's what we all should strive for. Like that Uber driver working 80 hours a week. We should all strive for putting our wares on display outside of our houses or down by the business tracks, because that's all we're left with. We don't have any viable, tangible results from any real trade that we engaged in. We don't have any education because we decided not to go to school. So let me just do the thing that I'm really good at, which is making food, and pretending that is what the American dream is about. Privatizing the income from that, yet socializing all the waste and all the negative aspects of that to society. Because again, I'm not free to walk where I can walk. I have to walk through trash. I have to walk through lines. I have to walk through people leaving street trash cans overfilling with food that attracts more rats. Look at New York City, and you're going to see the issues that Los Angeles has if we don't come to a realization that our infrastructure is broken. And those fires in Altadena and Pacific Palisades have already shown us that our infrastructures are not built to even remotely protect us. Again, you have every right to protest, to be upset. You don't have rights to burn down cities. You don't have the right to create disruptions, to throw rocks at people who are just trying to go about their day. But we have to understand that we're living in this world where manifest destiny is still very much the name of the game. To be American is to understand you are truly alone in this country. You are truly here to create the opportunities that will benefit you in whatever way they're going to create them. And that is the great aspect of America, is that it is this holding space. But we can't sit here and be upset when we don't get our way. And we can't sit here and light cars on fire when we're trying to prove points that we never bothered to prove back when the other guy that we liked was the president. When it was our guy and it was our team, it's not okay to say, yeah, it was okay when that happened. Obama had close to 5 million deportations. He is the architect of the modern child being caged mechanism. Under his watch, removals without a judge's administrative order, meaning that they weren't even brought to trial, increased from 50% roughly to close to 85%. On average, 75% of the people that were caught under the Obama regime were not brought to trial. They were, do not pass go, do not collect $200, go straight to jail. Now, when it's the other guy, he's just as horrible, if not worse. He's a bigger narcissist, but at least he's honest about it. And that is the reason why he is so polarizing. The orange guy doesn't make any excuses for his narcissistic behavior. He is the most accurate mirror Americans have of the system. Donald Trump is as American as George Washington, because the same thing that motivated George Washington to cross the Delaware River is the same thing that's motivating Donald Trump to be who he is today. The system becomes overwhelmed because we can't compete. We're horrible human beings because I don't get the likes and the views that this other person gets, who may have gotten themselves a bot farm somewhere. There's videos of that all over social media, of how most of your Instagram influencers are essentially talking to ghosts and robots who are promoting their stuff and amplifying their voices artificially. But we stay locked in it because we want to trick ourselves and lie to ourselves that we're actually engaged citizens, rather than believing that we are well individuals that just need a little alignment to put us on the path towards our greatest happiness. And that's what PrecisionCycle does, because it exists to keep you from becoming a casualty to a rigged game. You don't need healing. You need calibration. Let them play checkers while you learn the board and you run it, because that is the thing that PrecisionCycle will get you to understand. You are operating in a rigged system. You exist as part of an original sin, which goes back to 370 treaties that were broken by American governments. When I say there's no difference between Barack Obama and Andrew Jackson. The reality is that this is just another example of the American government drawing out First Nations, Aboriginals, however we want to name them, American Indians, first settlers, original inhabitants, whatever name we want to give those individuals. America has a history, over 370 of those treaties to those nations broken. That's essentially America saying, we recognize you until you become an inconvenience. We recognize you until we need the land back. We value you and we respect you as a voting bloc until you become politically expendable and you have to suffer the consequences. This is America in a nutshell. Childish Gambino, he can rap about it all he wants in his format. This is America. The trust me, I got your back. You know what? Not so much. I'm going to pull the rug out from under you. And that's how we bring this back as a giant example of borderline personality. How did you go from talking about the grand scale of politics to borderline personality? I'll tell you. Borderline personality exists as a byproduct of an inability to mature and an inability to integrate experience. Thus, we're left with people who are constantly in a cycle where they are actively, unconsciously engaging narcissistic behavior that is meant to attract, extract, and then refuse. If you're into Bitcoin, you know what rug pulling is. It's when people will get on live streams and start saying, hey, buy this coin, it's going to go through the roof. Actively talking to the suckers and marks, watching it in real time build up as people keep depositing money into it, and then snatching all of that money, stopping the ability to trade, taking all that money and leaving people out and dry. That is classic rug pulling. That is also known as a Ponzi scheme. That is the American system. There's a reason Bernie Madoff did what he did. There's a reason why Ponzi and Ponzi scheme is a thing, because those exist as the cheat codes to capitalism. This is the crux of regulation. This is why winners pick winners, why governments pick winners and losers, because at the end of the day, at its core, the government here has, just like with Native Americans, just like with DACA, said, come and trust us, give us your data, put your faith in us, and watch as we pull that dream out from under you. That is not unlike your ex who told you she loved you or he loved you, showed you that, may have given you some of the best intimacy you've ever had, reflected back to you the things that you wanted to have reflected, and then took the opportunity to break your heart and pull away right as you caught feelings. Why? Because whether it's George Washington, whether it's Barack Obama, whether it's your crazy ex, narcissism, gaslighting, and manipulation have been normalized since day one. It is built into the DNA of this country. I don't think that's a controversial thing to say. I think that is saying the obvious. Whether we're here trying to navigate this on our own, or whether we're here to utilize other systems like PrecisionCycle, we have to make a choice. You have to make a choice. Do you want to keep living in a system that continues to speak to you and oppresses you, or do we want to live as free human beings? People that understand the dynamics occurring around us, that recognize we're being manipulated, either by close contacts or by systems we're actively engaging in. And whether or not we're going to tolerate that or find ways to remain self-calibrated, centered, and able to pursue relief and justice in ways that advance the cause and create actual growth in human beings and doesn't expose the worst parts of humanity. This has been a lot to talk about. I've put a lot of concepts together. I don't want to make it seem like I'm one of these MAGA America First types. That's definitely not the case. I see the world a certain type of way, and what I'm seeing is narcissism being normalized at a grand scale. And the thing that we have to call that out, make it apparent, make it plain. The longer we turn our heads to that, the longer we're going to normalize mental dysfunction, narcissistic manipulation, the Donald Trumps of the world being in power, the Barack Obamas not living up to their word, and the longer that we're going to live stuck, suspended, and all these things that don't matter, as opposed to moving forward with our own wellness, recalibration, healing journey. Join us at PrecisionCycle. Learn how these systems are meant to destroy you. Learn how they're meant to keep you down so that you can understand, how do I create my own positive outcome? How do I create my own destiny? How do I manifest my own success in this rigged game? Because opportunity is out there. It exists. You just have to find the tools to remain well calibrated on your journey. That is what PrecisionCycle offers: clarity, truth, maturity, insight, the cheat code to a rigged game. If you're willing to start your PrecisionCycle healing journey and manifest your destiny, have one of the best summers of your life, get this second half of 2025 on the right foot so that you can attack 2026 with the right mindset to take advantage of the opportunities that are going to exist, both economic, financially, personally. Reach out, DM Enrique at elevateepo.com, PrecisionCycle TV on Instagram and TikTok, PrecisionCycle TV on YouTube, elevateepo.com. Send me a DM. I am now accepting new clients. We are in the midst of our June push. So please reach out, send an email, get on our waiting list, have this opportunity to really experience PrecisionCycle and see how Your entire world exists as a giant puzzle piece that is only lacking that keystone for you to understand. That keystone being PrecisionCycle. Now more than ever, in this time, in this world where there's so much distrust, there's so much chaos, there's so much people not recognizing the value of humanity, now's the time to embark on your PrecisionCycle journey and understand what you are made of and how you will achieve the best life possible. My name is Enrique. Thank you very much for joining me on another episode of PrecisionCycle by Elevate.epo. Really appreciate all the downloads. If this episode has resonated with you, please feel free to reach out. Please send it to someone you feel may need to hear these words. You're not broken. The system is broken. You're just reacting to that broken system. With PrecisionCycle, we teach you how to see through that so that you can be the most optimized human being for this changing informational landscape. Thank you again. We'll be back Friday when we look at the psychology of Goodfellas, wise guys and wisdoms, be analyzing the different mental and personality positions of the characters in that iconic film by Martin Scorsese. That'll be a fun exercise, I'm sure. So please tune in for that. Once again, my name is Enrique Arteaga. Thank you very much for joining me. I wish you a very well and safe rest of the week, and I will be back on Friday with another PrecisionCycle. Thank you.